So one of our favorite questions is to talking about failure. You talked about also not receiving the NSF
Yeah, the first
career
time.
award the first time, but going for it again and receiving it the next time. So that is really, I think, always something nice to share that isn't always shared, but I think makes us feel like
Feel better.
yeah, feel more inspired for us to overcome obstacles or be
Oh
more
yeah, I mean grant funding is
persevere
just
more.
ripe with failures.
Yeah, well, would you be willing to share? I don't know if there's any other failures that come to mind, but we'd love to learn about sort of an experience of you feeling like you might have failed and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I was preparing for this question and actually I came up with a really great example. So I had a new student start in my lab in 2020. And I mean, just kind of a mess of a year, right? And on top of that, he started like literally, I think 3 or 4 days before I was induced with my son. And so I needed to come up with a project for him, and I was just like, okay, I don't know, look into this, right? And when I came back from maternity leave a few months later, like he was showing me the data, and it occurred to me like the question I'd asked him made no sense. I was basically asking him to like measure something that we were controlling as an input. And I cannot express to you how stupid I felt. I mean, I felt like I was very disappointed in myself, like for, I felt like I had sort of wasted his time, which was like weighed very heavily on me. And also just like kind of embarrassed. It seemed like such a rookie mistake. So I think, yeah, failure is an unfortunate side effect or happenstance like along the road to often better things. So the good news that came out of this is that so he developed in sort of analyzing the simulations that I'd asked him to analyze, he developed some really nice code that we've used since in some other students' projects that are not as meaningless. So the time was not completely wasted. I mean, and of course, like he learned things along the way, right? Like
Right, of course, yeah.
Learned about the project and about the question and about the code and everything like that. But we have been able to use like his actual output from that. And then the other thing is it just got him like really interested in the project and like really interested in these questions. So he ended up becoming the main contributor on this perspective paper that we're hoping to submit actually really this month, which I'm super excited about. So this there's this like foundational paper in sort of the field of brain morphology from 1929, sorry, actually he's a Dutch neuroanatomist, but written in German. And everybody cites this paper, but like most of us don't speak German. I mean, Ellen Kuhl actually does, right? But so there are some people who probably read it and enjoyed it in its entirety, but a lot of us haven't. And so I hired a Notre Dame student. I found a chemical engineering German double major and paid him to translate this paper. And so we're going to be submitting the full English translation of this paper that a lot of the field has been built on, but I think has been often built on sort of our understanding of the figures, not really the text. And then we wrote an accompanying perspective to sort of explore like, what were the ideas at the time that he was responding to and how has that like gone on to influence the field. So he got really just into the question and like really put a lot of work into the perspective paper. So I think it turned out well, but I felt like such an idiot. I cannot even describe.
It's hard when it's like someone else's time. I feel like that's also where my main failures feel like, it's like, oh no, like it's not just me. Like I don't care if I fail sometimes, but like if it affects someone else, it's hard.
Yeah.
So totally can
Yeah.
relate.
And like I can look for the bright side, like, oh well, I learned something from it.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
but when I have to tell him that, like, hey, you learned something from my mistake.
Yeah. Together.